Welcome back to Star or Shovelware, my name's Luke, and in today's review we're going to be taking a look at Bright Memory Infinite Gold Edition on the Nintendo Switch, a fast-paced first-person shooter featuring an awesome blend of gunplay and swordplay as you embark on an investigation mission to discover the source of some very unusual atmospheric phenomenon. Amazingly though, the game comes to us from one-man indie developer FYQD Studio, and it's a port of the 2020 Steam release. But how well does it run on the Switch, and is it worth your time and cash? Well, drop me a like and a sub if you enjoy my content and want to see more, and let's find out. So the story in Bright Memory wastes no time in getting started, and in the introductory cutscene our main lady Shellia gets suited and booted as she's sent on a mission to investigate some unusual weather phenomenon. As an operative of the Supernatural Science Research Organisation, or SRO, Shellia is equipped with some pretty high-tech gadgets, and after warping her way to the mission location she then sets out on foot to survey the area, which is already occupied by a rival faction led by a dodgy geezer known as General Lin. Now, unfortunately, the story in Bright Memory kind of takes a backseat throughout the majority of the game, and very little is actually explained or expanded on, but it basically involves you fighting your way towards a black hole, which obviously appears to be the source of the disturbance. Along the way you encounter both General Lin's forces as well as a group of ancient looking warriors who appear to be under the control of a mysterious Chinese emperor, and the game's ending does attempt to give some context to the events that you witness, but sadly I felt that it was too little too late and overall a rather weak conclusion, which really is a shame as I feel there could have been plenty of depth to the game's lore, but as it is, the story just ends up feeling a little bit hollow and overall a little bit disappointing. Now, when it comes to gameplay in Bright Memory, I'd say that in many ways it more than makes up for the lacklustre plotline, with the game's high-octane action taking precedence with barely a moment's downtime between the combat. There's a decent amount of platforming to be had in the form of some parkour wall running, double jumping and grappling hooking, and there are a couple of sections which change things up a little, but throughout the majority of the game your objective is to keep following the waypoint markers and basically annihilate anything in your path. Now, if you played the Shadow Warrior games, I'd say that the combat in Bright Memory is most similar to this in its feel, and I definitely feel like the developer took some inspiration for these games with a combination of first-person shooting and swordplay, but the combat mechanics are really well put together, and although there are sections where you'll be picking off enemies at a distance, for the most part you're going to be in the thick of it, utilising everything at your disposal to get the job done. Throughout the game though, you gain access to 4 different weapons ideal for engaging enemies at various distances. Each of these weapons comes with a primary fire mode, as well as a more powerful secondary fire mode fueled by rarer special ammo which can be found strewn about the place. And unlike some games that I played, I definitely feel like I got plenty of use out of all 4 of these weapons, as each of them proved to be effective in different scenarios, with things like the heat-seeking bullets of the machine gun able to mow through hordes of grunts, while the explosive rounds in the pistol and sniper rifles were great for destroying enemy shields and taking down the bosses faster. Where I feel the game really shines though is in its melee combat, which really adds to the overall speed of the game, and I particularly liked how visceral it felt as you lop off the limbs of any poor sod in your way. But it's not all just about leaping from enemy to enemy, there's also an element of skill to it, as some of the larger enemies require you to quickly sidestep or block their attacks, whittling down their armour before going in for the counter attack. In addition to your weapons, you also have a kind of telekinesis ability, enabling you to pull enemies towards you and trap them in a stasis field before unleashing a telekinetic blast at them. And throughout the game, both your abilities and weapons can be upgraded, unlocking new abilities, including a powerful leap slam and spinning blade attack. And I found that all these things combined made for some great combat sequences, and really allowed me to control the battle and pick out my targets. When it comes to the game's enemies, there's also some really good variety here, and like I said, the enemy variants really make you utilise both your ranged and melee weapons, as the enemies themselves also come in melee and ranged variants. Many of the larger boss-like enemies combine both of these and have their own unique movesets for you to learn and avoid, and while I will say that they were relatively similar when it came to the format of these fights, requiring you to repeatedly strip their armour before taking out a chunk of the health, they were all pretty enjoyable, and there was enough variety to the mechanics to keep things interesting. Now, as I said, most of the levels in the game will have you following a waypoint marker and fighting your way through them. However, there are a couple of points in the game where things are switched up a little. Firstly, with a stealth mission where you're armed with only a meat cleaver and have to sneak your way past enemies, or hack them to death with said meat cleaver. And the second is a driving section seating you in a James Bond style sports car. While I've never really been a huge fan of stealth sections in games, this one actually wasn't too bad. It's relatively short-lived and you don't fail the mission if you get spotted, but the driving section is probably the game's weakest element. Enemy vehicles pop into existence and are a bit of a pain to shoot due to them driving too slow and reversing all over the place, and several times I accidentally flipped my car and had to restart the section. But the effort has clearly been made here to try and keep things interesting, which, despite the downsides, I can still appreciate. Now, there's not much more to say when it comes to gameplay, and overall I have to say I thought it was a fantastic effort from the solo dev. The combat is solid, fast paced and fluid, it's reasonably challenging on normal difficulty, and there's enough variety to the enemies so that it doesn't become dull or repetitive. What I will say though is that Bright Memory is not a long game, taking me less than 2 hours to complete from start to finish, and for this reason I do feel like the $20 asking price may come across as a little bit steep for some people. You are able to replay the game on harder difficulties, carrying over your unlocked skills and abilities, which does add a little bit of replayability to it, but I'm still not entirely convinced that this will be enough for some people. Overall though, I really enjoyed my time with Bright Memory. For me it's definitely up there amongst some of the best shooters on the platform, and I was incredibly impressed at what this one-man dev team was actually able to achieve here. So visually, I have to admit that when I first saw the eShop screenshots I had my doubts, but for once they're actually legit and the game looks great on the Switch. Unlike some other titles I've played, the developer has done a fantastic job of optimising the visuals, ensuring that the texture resolutions retain a decent level of quality for both the character models and the environments, and although the Japanese setting never changes so there's not a whole lot of variety to the level's visuals, there are still some impressive looking areas to encounter. Audio-wise, the developer has also done a great job. The weapons sound punchy, there's some great sound effects and chatter from the enemies, and the voice acting is also really well done. The game's music has some notably Asian vibes to it whilst being actiony enough to fit the gameplay, and overall I was really impressed with both the visuals and audio of this one. So for me, one of the most surprising things about Bright Memory has to be the game's performance on the Switch, as this one succeeds where even big AAA developers have failed, maintaining a solid performance throughout, despite the fast-paced combat and high-quality visuals. When it comes to gameplay issues, there's really not that much to mention. I did have the game crash on me during a boss fight, but this only occurred once, and the enemy AI sometimes appeared to just freeze up and stand there for a few seconds. But other than this, the driving sections are probably my biggest criticism, and the load screens can be a little lengthy each time you die. Overall though, I thought it was a really good job all round with this one. The developer has done a great job of optimising the game on the Switch, and the gameplay is solid, if not a little on the short side. And so when it comes to my own personal rating, I'm going to be giving Bright Memory Infinite 4 out of 5 stars. If you enjoy fast-paced shooters, especially ones like the Shadow Warrior games, then you'll no doubt have a blast with this one. Just be aware of its short playtime when considering whether or not to pick it up. And so that about does it for this review of Bright Memory Infinite on the Nintendo Switch. So what do you think? Is it something that you're going to be picking up and giving a blast? Or will you be waiting out for a sale on this one? Let me know down in the comments section below. As always, drop me a like and sub if you enjoy my content. Thanks once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.